So let's get right into it. I believe Sean Strickland won his first fight against Dricus du Plessis. 3 rounds to 2, perhaps 4-1. I watched that fight probably 15 times, and I think he got robbed there. There, there was no way. I even made screenshots comparing the damage after each round, just to see for myself. Was I watching another fight again and not seeing anything? There was no way he lost the title to du Plessis back then. But in the rematch, it was one-way street, of course. So there's no doubt that du Plessis won that fight. So props to du Plessis on that. But that leaves Sean in the unknown. And just besides beating Paulo Costa, there's not that much that could be going on for him in this division. He has to get back to a title shot. Otherwise, he's going to be a division holder and he's going to defend against up and coming contenders like Fluffy Hernandez, who has a recent good win against Dolidze and Brandon Allen, one which was pretty unexpected, and odds were quite against him. So he earned himself a pretty good shot there. So let's look at their previous 3 fights and analyze how those look like in a short bit. So Sean Strickland last 3 fights, that was against du Plessis, the fight that he lost, which I think everything was as expected. Sean got hit, he got his eye cut, and that perhaps skewed the judges and the audience to give a decision to du Plessis, but I don't think that was the case at all. The decision should have gone to Sean there. I think he did what he needed to do, but that's what you get when you're like Sean Strickland and not finishing fights. Anything can happen if you make those 5 rounds. Typically, he wins a decision, so that's fine. He won against Izzy in the title fight, although he was close to finish. If you make it that far, it's still a toss-up. You never really know. So if anything left for Sean Strickland in his career is to actually put a stamp on it and go for the finish each fight that he has left, then he has a shot both at the title and continuous career. Otherwise, that style just doesn't play out. It's not as exciting otherwise, and the only thing he can do is be popular in social media, which is good for UFC. So that's why they're going to give him the fights that are give or take exciting enough for the fans to watch and blow up the sport even more. So in a good way. So he lost decision to du Plessis. He went against Paulo Costa and won a split decision. It was a close fight. I also thought Sean won the fight, but it was close enough. So it wasn't a really great fight for Strickland. He just did kind of what needed to be done to get the win. And then he got a rematch. Because of how good the first fight was between du Plessis and Strickland, he basically earned a rematch with a decision win, which is rare in UFC. That typically takes a bit more when you're not getting finishes. So there's that. And then he got battered quite badly by du Plessis. It was one-way street in du Plessis' title defense, and Sean Strickland lost again. He hasn't fought since, so now he has an up-and-coming contender fighting against him. Now, if you look at the last 3 fights of Anthony Fluffy Hernandez, he beat Michel Pereira, which isn't a big deal, although it's 5th round KO, considering what kind of trouble typically Hernandez puts people in and what kind of mess Pereira is making with all his dances and splits and all kinds of quackery. It should have been a finish. He should have taken care of the business. He won as he was supposed to. So fair enough in that regard. Now, Brandon Allen, way bigger contender. Brandon Allen was I believe he was on a 7 or 8 fight win streak. So he was a big favorite in that fight, and anything goes with him. He can finish. He can submit. He can KO people. So Hernandez wasn't a favorite at all. Yet he prevailed and won a decision against Brandon Allen. So props to him on that. It was a good fight. On the other hand, fight against Dolidze was, give or take, I would almost write it off to Dolidze just not being ready. So he didn't seem like he was in his place. He talked a lot of trash and couldn't back it up in the whole fight and ran out of energy and eventually got submitted by Hernandez. So good win to him, and those 3 wins basically earned him a potential contender fight against Sean Strickland. So I think this is a really good fight uh, in the making. It should be very exciting. So we'll see how it goes. If we look at the fight odds, we can't really see that here, but we can see it on verdict typically. So Sean Strickland is not the favorite. So Fluffy Hernandez is quite a big favorite in this one, which is a bit surprising to me. I haven't checked these odds before, so that is a pretty interesting situation here. And I think people can make a lot of money if they put it on Strickland. I'll consider doing that myself. So I'm a bit surprised that bookmakers think that Strickland is the underdog here. So very, very interesting. Now, if we look at the verdict fan predictions, most people are picking Sean Strickland to win by decision. So it's one of these rare moments where betting odds are uh, against what the audience believes in for the most part. So so there we can also make our own pick in here and choose Strickland by decision uh, because I believe that's a clear possible win for Strickland if he just does what he always does. And I still don't believe that Fluffy Hernandez has proved what he needed to prove, although he is motivated and he had time. So no matter what, the odds I don't believe should be in Sean Strickland's favor. On a side note, when it comes to Strickland, I think it's absolutely important, especially now with the new deal that UFC has with the Paramount Plus, to start finishing fights. It's been a lot of guys that were big talkers, including Strickland and Paulo Costa and Merab, who's a great example of this, who's been talking a lot of trash and being funny and getting all the exposure, but winning decision after decision after decision. Even Makachev back in the day was winning decisions. So what's interesting is that Merab is a prime example that picked it up and finally managed to get the finishes in his fight. Well, he lost decision to Piotr Jan in the previous fight, but he had a couple of finishes there. So finishing O'Malley, that's a big one. You can't write it off in any way, and that started to make him more exciting as well. Strickland, he did have a finish against Imavov, I believe, and he needs to continue doing that, going for the finish. So not just wait until there's 5 seconds of the fight left and he goes in chest banging and rushing through and try to fight someone when the bell is basically ringing. That's irrelevant. Nobody really cares about it. And then, although it's a nice finish, so he looks like a tough man, and as he is, of course, but that's not. I don't think that's necessarily what UFC needs. I think UFC needs the guys that start the fight, perhaps figuring out their aim and jabs and the teeps that Strickland does, and then goes for broke when they can, because that's what makes the sport more exciting. We don't need the calculated decision winners. We want someone to be finished, and that's what I feel like has been missing Strickland's whole career. So just jabbing and defending, jabbing and defending, jabbing and defending. That did win him a title, so you can't argue with that. But that also makes his fights relatively boring. And you can see that in the Adesanya's fight against Strickland. The moment he got the knockdown, everything changed. Even if he didn't get another one, but everything changed because you now know that, hey, this guy can actually knock him out. He was almost there. So you watch the next 3 rounds or so, or 4, just waiting for it to happen. And that made it exciting. That's really all it takes. It's really important that the guys that actually have the talk, they also walk the walk, even though I'll take the side of, I'd rather them do the talk and not get the KOs than just be silent and never show up and not have any personality and not attract more fans and all that. But with all that being said, I think the level of the UFC is there where if you want to be the best of the sport and you want to get great fights and you want to win the title, you just have to start getting finishes or at least going for them, getting into the war at some point just to get there and thinking strategically about it, not just necessarily 3rd round out of 5 and it's kind of boring and nothing goes and you just stupidly go for broke. Well, perhaps you pick a situation where you attempt to do so strategically when you have some energy left, when you know you can recover from some shots. and then continue with your own strategy. That would be my take on this. But let me know what you guys think about it, because it's been one of another things that has been bothering me in the UFC, especially when we have this discrepancy between tough guys talking and walking, and then everyone wants to be Conor, but everyone sort of loses just by not going for broke when it's necessary. On to the next one, Jeff Neal versus Urosh Medich. That should be an interesting fight, although it's becoming a spot filler for Jeff Neal to fight up and coming contenders. Uh, if you look at his last 3 fights, he lost to Prades and got knocked out. So he got knocked out by Prades. He finished Dos Anjos pretty quickly, and he won a split decision. He lost a split decision against Ian Machado Gary, which was quite controversial because it was. I also had Jeff Neal actually winning the fight, so somehow Gary got the decision. Good for him, and soon he's gonna be aiming for another title shot. So don't know what to expect out of Jeff Neal here. I think he's on the downhill of the career, so him fighting up and coming contenders just makes a lot of sense in there. And if we have a look at the previous opponents of Medich, he once against Salikov, knocked him out, even though Salikov was, I don't recall if he was favored by the odds, but I would have had him winning the fight if it wasn't for what actually happened. So that's a good win for him, and that earned him a shot at rankings eventually. Then he won against Urbina, which was who was one of, I also don't recall now if he won the Ultimate Fighter, but he was just up and coming talent, and he got knocked out as well. So basically a couple of wins by KO within the first minute earn him rankings, and that also relates back to the discussion we just had earlier about fighters finishing the fights. If you go for the finish, you'll climb way quickly, and of course that is way riskier, but that's also, again, that's the sport. And he got knocked out by Soriano in the first 30 seconds. So his fight over a year ago ended like this. So 2 wins with the KOs, and he's taking a shot at the ranking. So that's pretty good for him. Up next, Dan Ige versus Milquisel Costa. If we check Dan Ige's fight history, you have him losing to Laurel Murphy. That's not a big surprise there. Murphy is a talent, and he's probably going to be fighting for the title next if he beats Evloev. So that's what it is. Ige is a veteran, so he's getting a lot of fights to defend basically defend the division. Then Ige beat Woodson by KO, which was also surprising to most people. I think Woodson was coming in hot, and he was favorite in that fight. That didn't work out to him, and then he lost a fight against Patricio Pitbull, so which was a decision, and it was quite a tight and close fight. They didn't go for a finish, so that's where it ended. I think that's going to be also pretty interesting fight, but no big promise there. Versus and then if you look at Costa, he beat Rodriguez, who I don't know. He beat Erosa, who I've seen one of his fights, but he's just an up and coming guy. And then he beat Sharir, which was exciting up and comer that Costa stopped. So he's on a good run now with the 3 fight win streak, and perhaps he's gonna take Dan Ige's ranking now if he wins the fight. I have no take. If I had to guess, I'm still picking Dan Ige just because. Spivak versus Ante Delia. His last 3 fights, he lost to Cortes Acosta, so that's fair enough. He lost to Almeida, and he won against Tibura. So he's on a 2-fight losing streak. So he needs to beat Delia pretty convincing fashion, because Delia also won against Tibura. So we'll see how that fight goes. And of course, he also lost against Cortez. So that's basically Sergey Spivak or Spivak defending his spot. battle of Eastern Europe and the former Yugoslavian countries. Up to next, Jacoby Smith. I have no pick in there, and I'm gonna leave that to you guys in that regard. Uh, I don't particularly care for this fight. And then we have Michel Pereira and Zach Reese. I don't know about Zach Reese, but Pereira style. So I don't know. I guess Dumas is one of his. Actually, has pretty reasonable wins here. Dumas and Todorovic, they're solid guys. So nothing to say there, and got finished against McQuee. So whatever you say, seems like that could be a good fight. And then you have Michel Pereira, who we talked about earlier, who I think is always exciting doing his stupid. So we'll see how that goes. But he lost his last 3 fights, if not more. Yeah, so he lost his last 3 fights and spoiled Poteria's chances of going up quicker. So we'll see. I without knowing the Zach Reese guy, I would bet on him just because I think Pereira is doing too much stupid stuff in the cage and gets caught all the time. Even if he wins the fight, he still gets caught with this, and he pays the price. So that's part of his charm, part of why he loses the fights, and he's a silly guy that, he has a lot of fans because of that, including myself. I just think if he wants to win, he has to stop doing that, at least if he wants to win consistently. So that's going to be it for the preview of the UFC Fight Night. I think Strickland and Fluffy will have a good fight, and I would still bet on Strickland. Plus, the odds are really good for him. So if you're betting, you should do that if you want to. Otherwise, there are some good, decent fights in the card, but it's not that much. So just gonna focus on making sure to watch Strickland and Fluffy, and then we'll see if there's other fights that get into the radar. So don't forget to like and subscribe, comment who do you think is gonna win, Strickland or Fluffy, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.